Today, I have a very special guest with us from the United Kingdom on The Ordinary Filmmaker. Ian Robinson is a landscape, wedding, portrait, and astrophotographer, and he's also an upcoming YouTube personality.
Delivering informative capability-based reviews and tutorials on camera gear, filming techniques, and content creation.
Hi, I'm Simon, and this is The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new here, please like and subscribe, as it really helps grow my channel. And all the links to everything I talk about in this video are in the description down below. Ian, thanks for taking time out to visit The Ordinary Filmmaker.
You're very welcome, Simon, and thank you very much for inviting me to your channel.
I came across your channel while I was doing research on the 1DX Mark III. The video was about issues with the camera automatically shutting off and sensor spots. You really helped me out by letting me use some of your clips from that video, and it made my video much better, so thanks a lot for letting me use those clips. Now, for you, my audience, please do me a favor. Check out Ian's channel later and subscribe. Let's get Ian over that 1,000 subscriber mark.
Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say that. And you're more than welcome to use the information that I had there. That was great. And after looking at your channel, very inspirational as well. And I really enjoy your channel too. So again, I subscribe to your channel and I've been watching it ever since, to be honest.
Thanks a lot, Ian. How long have you had your channel?
I've had my channel for a number of years now. However, I've not really been consistent with it in the early days. The early days, I really didn't understand what YouTube was all about. I used it really just to put videos on there so I could keep track of the videos and somewhere to store videos, really. I didn't really understand what YouTube was all about until around about 2 years ago, when I started to do things a little bit more seriously and basically do a lot more when it comes to photography. Now, photography is a passion of mine, and it's also partly a job of mine as well. So I do it semi-professionally. I'm not fully professional. I do it semi-professionally, and I do workshops and such like. And I could see an opening there for YouTube to teach other people and you know, give them information that I've learned in my time of photography.
Yeah, Ian, I certainly see a difference in the videos you've posted over the last year. What would you say your vision is now for your channel? Where do you see yourself in a year or two? Well,
I hope to see myself quite up there, at least gaining 1,000 subscribers and starting to climb in YouTube. I love doing the filming. It's really started to get me into filming more and more and more. And I'm the kind of guy that loves learning and enjoys learning new tricks. So yeah, that's where I'd love to be in a couple of months' time, at least. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That thirst for knowledge, that ability or that eagerness to learn. There's a quote from a movie from the Dead Poets Society, and it says something about sucking the marrow out of life. And to me, a big part of that is about education. It's about learning. It's about understanding simple things like how the universe works. But I think I'm getting us a little bit off topic here. Ian, who do you consider to be your audience?
Well, I consider the up-and-coming photographers, if I'm honest, the people that know a little less than I do, I suppose, and I just want to help people gain more knowledge, really. That is my aim, and that is my goal, and that is they are the people that I suppose that I aim towards. Saying that, there's a variety of genres that I know in photography. And I just want to give out that information to those people. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose if it's a class of person that I'm looking at, I suppose it would be people that are up and coming in the photography world.
So a lot of people are starting out, they're getting cameras. Some of them are just starting with smartphones. Some of them have DSLRs or even mirrorless cameras. But what I'm really curious about is how you got started. What was your first camera? What was your first lens? What did you start photographing?
Well, my first camera was I believe was a Panasonic or something like that. It was film, and I never used to do the darkroom I always used to send my pictures off and hope for the best that I got them back. That was in the early days, and I really enjoyed photography, and I really enjoyed waiting to get those photographs back, you know, and see what we got and or what we hadn't. And you know, I just really enjoyed doing the technical side of it. ISO, for example, I mean, a lot of people don't realise when they're starting out what ISO is. Now that comes from film days, of course, as you know. So I would generally be using ISO 400 in a film, and I still, in my processing, I'm diverting a little bit, but in my processing, I like to recreate that medium format look in my photography. Not all the time, but generally, when it comes to weddings and portraits, I love that look. It's a real magical, beautiful look. It's a fairy tale look, and it just blends itself beautifully with weddings and wedding photography. So yeah, I mean, that's my first camera. So then we moved on and came along digital world, and my first digital camera was, now the first digital camera I ever owned was with a computer, and there was a deal going, and it was £2,500 for a computer, and you got a digital camera to go with it, and that was bizarre, but I went for the deal because I loved the camera. I thought, wow, okay, brilliant. And this camera was one of the first digital cameras out there, and it was a 1 megapixel sensor, believe it or not, and that was the first digital camera I ever owned. Now, going back 15, 16 years ago, I then went on to Olympus, and I owned my very first Olympus camera, which was a DSLR, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it was an entry level, and it came with, obviously, a DSLR, as you know, comes with all different lenses. And from there on, I got really into photography more and more and more, and I started to get really loving the landscape side of it, and really enjoying that. So from moving on from Olympus, I then moved on to Canon because I could see the advantages with the Canon cameras, and Olympus being quite a crop, isn't it? It's a 4/3 crop, so it's half cropped, and I found that quite a restriction on doing landscapes. So that is why I changed from Olympus to Canon, for example, and I went from. But the problem is, I loved landscapes and I also loved wildlife at the time. So I needed a camera that was going to serve those two purposes. Now, I knew I needed a crop sensor for the wildlife, but I also needed a full frame sensor for landscapes. So I invested heavily into the Canon 7D Mark I for my wildlife, and then invested into the 5D Mark I for my landscapes. And that's where I began, really, 15 years or so ago. That is where I started really getting serious. And yes, and here we are today, moving on. I've gone through all the 5Ds, all the way up to the EOS R, which I'm using today. And I am also using a small camera as well, a small mirrorless, called the Canon M6 Mark II, which I've acquired very recently, and that is for my videos and vlogging. That's why I bought that predominantly. But I've been really enjoying this M6 Mark II because of everything that can be done with it as a small camera. It's a small camera with a lot of punch, in my opinion.
Ian, there's so much to unpack there. I want to ask you one thing about ISO, because when I first had it was a point and shoot camera. I used 35mm film as well. And I never really knew what film to get. ISO 100, ISO 400, they all seem to kind of work, but I never quite understood it. And I think today, a lot of photographers and videographers still don't quite understand what ISO means and what it does. Sure, we hear about ISO range, we hear about low light performance, ISO range, but I think a lot of us are just following recommendations and trying things out and go, oh, this works. As part of this learning experience, because we're here to help others understand this is not just a wonderful piece about two blokes having a conversation, but can you help share with the folks out there really what ISO means and what it means to photographers and videographers?
It's actually a terminology, and it's called International Organization for Standardization. And that's what ISO means. That's what the short term is. Now, ISO is your last option that you would go for if you were to go into this. The way I was taught with photography was there's a triangle, and the triangle, there's priorities in that triangle. Now, the priority being shutter speed, and the second priority would be aperture, and the third priority would be, and the last priority would be ISO. Now, everyone knows that ISO, the lower you go with the ISO, the cleaner your image is, if you mix them all together very well. So ISO is the last thing that you would go to and pump up, if you like, if you cannot, or the light is just not there for your lens or your lens and camera combination. So, yeah, I mean, I could go on all day really with ISO. It is basically a last resort option to go to if you can't get any light into your camera.
All right, very good, thank you. I'm curious, you were telling me a lot about the different cameras you grew up with the different types of shooting, whether it be landscape, wedding, or event type work. But deep down, Ian, what does photography mean to you? What do you really get out of it?
Well, as I said before, I love learning, and I have gone through quite a few many things in my time to try and feed my brain, from boating to sailing to skiing to owning and flying remote control helicopters and aeroplanes, and none of them really managed to keep me going and feeding me as such. And they're all very, very expensive hobbies as well. I'm not saying that this isn't, because this is, but the thing is, you can't crash, well, some people can, you can't crash a camera, for example, although saying that, I have done. And that was one of my upset moments, but we'll go through that later on, I'm sure.
So you were saying that you use the EOS, I believe it's the EOS R and the, was it the M6 Mark II? Are those, is that what's in your camera bag these days?
Yes, they're the two cameras that I have now. I used to have the 5DS, which is a 50.6 megapixel camera, but we'll probably talk about that later on. But they are predominantly my two cameras that I use now. Both are mirrorless, as you know, and work really well for me personally and for what I do. Photography
quite often is about a whole bunch of different opportunities, and sometimes weather gets in the way, other things get in the way. What do you find is the most frustrating thing about photography?
Well, with landscapes, if we talk about landscapes for a minute, the most frustrating thing about landscapes for me is weather. But I also embrace some kinds of weather, be it storms or things like that. I will go out of my way to chase a storm. I will have a holiday in the van and go to parts of the country to embrace that storm and try and capture that on camera. So it's not always fair weather. In fact, I don't like blue skies, bright blue skies and nothing else. I kind of find that quite boring, if I'm honest. But when it comes to mood, I love mood and drama in my photography. So when it comes to landscapes, drama and mood is great for me. I love that. It creates a fantastic image for me personally. I do love the light as well. So if you can get the light in with the mood, are magical. That is magical. So, and it also takes me to a lot of places, but I'm sure we'll cover that in a little while.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know what you consider your photography style is. You talk a lot about weather, and I agree. Weather, see, a sunny blue sky is just very peaceful. It's very calm. But once you've got weather, you've got attitude. You've got a completely different feeling.
Yes, you have. Yeah, a totally different feeling. And so, you know, you can go up a mountain and it could be absolutely, the weather can be really up against you, and that in itself is not very nice. But when you've got the mood there, that you've got bubbly cloud, I call them bubbly clouds, you know, and then and they're broken up a little bit as well, and you're getting some light through it. That's the sort of mood that I love and really enjoy. I mean, I've walked up a few mountains now to literally get the views from above, and I've been up some stunning places, I really have. So, yeah.
Ian, tell us about some of those stunning places, those mountains you've been up.
Okay, so one absolutely beautiful mountain that I went up, which actually is not a mountain, it's a Monroe. So it's not classed as a mountain because it's too small, but one of them, that one was stunning. That has to be one of my favourites, and it's called Stack Polly, and it's located in the far north of Scotland. Now, that is a stunning place, and it took us, I took my daughter up there recently, last year, and it took us about 2.5 hours to get to the top. Yeah, it's not an amazingly high mountain, it's a Monroe, like I say, but it is very, very, very steep. It's renowned for being incredibly steep. In fact, it is a scramble at times. So it's quite a challenge, even for me, let alone a 12-year-old. But we got up there, and when we got up there, the views were absolutely amazing. And pictures behind me will show you that particular view. We had rainbows, we had everything going on. The mood was absolutely stunning, and that you couldn't ask for any more. For a landscape photographer, I was in heaven. The second place that I've been, and that I would class as the most favourite place I've ever been, and the most stunning place I've ever been, is in Switzerland. Switzerland. Switzerland, and that was the Matterhorn, and it's world renowned, of course. You see that mountain on Toblerone packets and all sorts. But we went on the Gornergrat. We didn't walk up there. We went on the Gornergrat railway, and that in itself was amazing. But when we got to the top, I can remember all the feelings of being breathlessness, because we were at 3,100 meters up. So that was very, very high. In fact, if you convert that into feet, you're looking at around about 11,000 feet. So very high. It's where aircraft fly. So, you know, you are up there in the mountains. And we were below us. I can remember seeing all these absolutely stunning, what are they called? The ice. When you see rivers of ice, the glaciers. So yes, we saw all the glaciers flowing like a river all the way down below us, you know, and it's just amazing. And again, this photo here I'll show you is one of the most stunning places and breathtaking places I've ever been in my life so far. I'm sure there are many, many more places, but that for me was gobsmackingly beautiful.
Yeah, Ian, these are just absolutely stunning environments. I can picture the Scottish Highlands from many episodes of Doctor Who I've been watching, as well as geologist Ian Stewart. And of course the Matterhorn, you know, The Sound of Music, to name one movie. What a beautiful, beautiful mountain. But here's one problem I always have, and this is because obviously I'm an amateur, but when I go someplace and I shoot photos, I come back later going, oh, I should have taken more shots of that. I didn't do this. Do you have that problem, or how do you deal with that problem? Let me ask you that. What do you recommend for beginners?
Well, if I was to recommend for beginners, I would take, I would take as many shots as you can possibly take, if I'm honest, and hope that you're going to get the best shots. I firmly believe in, you can't take enough shots in that respect. However, nowadays I only take the shots that I can see and that I can compose well. I'm a bit more, let's say I'm a bit more fussy nowadays than I was in my previous days. I have been known, when I was an amateur at landscape photography, I'd be taking 400 images a whole afternoon, going out, enjoying myself with the camera, taking 400 images, coming back and processing them and seeing which one was good and which one wasn't. But nowadays I don't do that. If I go out on a morning shoot, I'll probably take 20 to 25 images, and every one of them will be pretty decent. They won't be, some won't be award-winning, of course. You can't get award-winning images every day that you go out. It doesn't work like that with landscape. The light isn't there, for example. You go out in the morning, it's pitch black. You just do not know what you're going to get. So when you get there and then you realise that it's, oh dear, the cloud's coming over, oh dear, it's blank. So it is frustrating at times, but when it all comes together, that is when I'm in my absolute element. When I see the light happening, I see the colour in the sky, especially in the mornings. I love morning work, and yeah. So how about you, Simon? What is your what do you do for your job, and how have you got involved in videography, for example?
Oh, well, that's a loaded question. Do you have a day?
Okay.
Well, I'll keep it short. So my day job is quite boring. I'm what is referred to as an enterprise architect. And in that role, it's about ensuring that the projects that we work on as a business are closely aligned with the strategy and the vision and the goals of the organization. So we don't start off working on projects that really aren't aligned with where the corporation is going, because those projects will quite often fail. Which is why you'll hear me talk a lot about in my videos where I'm talking about how to get to 1,000, how to get to 100 views, and I talk about the importance of having a vision, a strategy, goals and objectives, because those objectives is what takes that vision and makes it something that you can measure against. But in terms of how did I get into this? Well, we're going to go back a little bit in time. I've always loved taking photos because I love capturing the moment. My mom and dad had a bad memory, and my memory started to fade a little bit when I was younger, and those photographs really bring back those emotions. But it wasn't until about, not 1937, I'm not that old, in 07, my arm was twisted into buying a red Corvette. For those of you who aren't from North America, you might not be aware, but a red Corvette is a sports car with a V8 engine, and the top comes off. And this really inspired me to get into photography. If the weather was nice, meaning not raining, I would get in my car. Well, first of all, I'd look at a map and I'd think, where do I want to go today? And I remember I thought, today I'm going to Portland, Maine. So I got in my car, I took my camera with me, and I took shots that were amazing. I remember going up Mount Washington, which is in North Conway. What a beautiful, beautiful mountain, and the road just twists and turns as you go up. And it's very much part of that American landscape. It's one of those roads you go up where, as the Americans would say, you pays your dollar and you takes your chances. There aren't guardrails where you'd expect guardrails to be. And this was May. There was still snow on parts of it, but it was open. And as you get closer to the top, there are parts where if you're on the passenger side, you look out your window, you don't see any road. In fact, all you see is a 2,000-foot drop. So this would get me really excited. I'd take my camera and I'd shoot a ton of shots. And you can see some of these up on the screen right now. And that is what kind of went hand in hand with me. I don't know whether it was the car that really got me interested in photography or the other way around. But it's amazing how your inspiration, or where your inspiration can come from. And so going back to you, let me ask you this. When you first started out, was it your love of travel and nature that got you into photography, or the other way around?
Well, I love travelling, and yes, I think you're right there. I think you're bang on, actually. It was the travelling that got me into photography. So photography came second to the travelling. I loved seeing these wonderful places, and I always wanted to know how to be able to capture them beautifully on camera, not just a snapshot. I've always looked at images, personally speaking, as if I could make an image and that I could frame it and put it on the wall, then I've done extremely well, and I'd be proud of it. So landscape came from traveling, yes, it certainly did. And from that, I ended up buying a camper van, and well, I actually bought a van because I couldn't afford a camper van. So I bought a VW camper, a VW van as a work van, and I slowly got it done up to become a fully fledged camper van. And that is what we have now. And that's there on the back wall, look, as you can see. And that has took me absolutely everywhere so far. It's done 230,000 miles, so it's quite high, but being a diesel it's fine, and the engine is more than fine as well. It's one of these really good engines that VW have done. In fact, some mechanics actually say it's one of the best engines VW ever did, and it was a 2.5 TDI, and they go on and on and on. Thankfully. Everything around it though breaks down, but the engine is great. So anyway, that's taken me everywhere, and because of that, I call that the TARDIS. That is my TARDIS, and we go everywhere in it and photograph some stunning landscapes and some stunning places. We are lucky in the UK that we do have some amazing places, Scotland being one, Wales being another, Cornwall being another. There are Lake District. Oh my God, the Lake District, superb. And the amount of workshops I do there. I do 2 workshops there every year. I shouldn't be plugging that, but that is what I do. I do 2 workshops. One in autumn with the autumn colours. Now I know America has got some stunning colours in autumn. I know that, and I'd love to go there and see them. However, the Lake District and Scotland really put on a good show in autumn. And the other one is just after the main part of winter, so February, start of February to end of February, I take people onto tours around Scotland and again the Lake District and places like that, where you get the mountains and the snow-capped mountains, and it's just stunning. It really is. I'm in my element, really, and you know, it's a great trip for me as well.
Well, Ian, just before I go on to my next question, which you pretty well got right into it, I do want to say to everybody out there, do us a favor, go out, take a look at Ian Robinson's channel. I've got the link in the description down below, and go ahead and like and subscribe. Ian's got a very relaxed video style. You'll learn a lot, and we're going to get into his astrophotography coming up soon, but there's a lot to learn, so go ahead, like and subscribe. So you were talking a little bit about locales, the Lake District, which I'm well aware of, Scotland, the UK, like many places in the world, is beautiful. You've got these beautiful streams and rivers, grasslands, forests, and then some utterly what are those movies that were like? They were filmed in New Zealand. Lord of the Rings. You've got Lord of the Rings.
Oh yes,
type.
Lord of the Rings stuff. Yes.
Yeah, it's very much Lord. They could have filmed it in the UK, but they didn't. But what locales do you enjoy the most?
Location-wise, that I enjoy the most are mountainous areas, because I live in Norfolk, and Norfolk is a very, very flat place. David Bowie sang a lovely song about it, or he put some words in there of Norfolk, but it's just dead flat. So when I get really excited when we pack the van up and we go to Scotland, especially Scotland, because Scotland, I have to say, is one of my favourite places in the UK.
Do you have a favourite destination?
Yeah, well, yes, I do. My favourite destination so far at the moment is Scotland. It has to be said. And I would say, Scotland-wise, I would say the Isle of Skye really pulls me that way all the time. It is a stunning place. I remember climbing a mountain in the snow there. That was amazing as well, and I put that up there. Too many wonderful places, really. But this place it's called the Old Man of Store. I don't know whether you're aware of that, are you, Simon?
I am, yes.
Well, the Old Man of Store is a mounting that they've done a film, and I'm trying, Prometheus, I think. It's a space film anyway. It's about an alien trilogy film. Anyway, right at the start of the film, they've got the Old Man of Store, and they're on the Old Man of Store, and you see it, and it looks very space-like there. Anyway, I climbed that mountain the day before New Year's Day, so New Year's Eve, in fact, and that was very, very slippery, snow everywhere, and snow coming up halfway up to my knees, so it was very, very difficult to actually physically walk through it because it was so deep. But when we got to the top, we had the sun rising, and we set off in the dark, and we got up there when the sun was rising, and we got magical light. And this particular picture here won me a lot of awards, and yeah, I knew I had a good image. You just know. You look on the back of the camera, you go, oh my God, yes, beautiful, beautiful. And yeah, it was all well worthwhile being up there. It just felt very, very godly-like, if you like. It's magical, absolutely magical. So yeah, that's the Old Man of Store in Scotland. So yes, I love Scotland dearly, and there are so many places there that you can just venture out and you go, oh my God, I haven't seen this before. Oh wow, look at that. So you're turning every corner you go through, and every bend you come around, you'll go round a bend and you'll see this huge mountain that wasn't there just a second ago, and you just, wow, you know, it is that amazing up there.
Ian, if you like magical, you've got to try this out. New Zealand is one of the most amazing countries I've ever lived in. It's a place that time seems to have forgotten. And I've done reports on it because when I've lived in New Zealand, but when I left New Zealand, the love of New Zealand never left me. And I did reports in school. And one of the things that's always stuck with me is New Zealand has about 11 or 10 of the world's 12 different climate zones. All that stuff you have in Yellowstone, the boiling mud, the different chemical pools and all that, you've got that in New Zealand. You've got tall mountains, you've got active volcanoes, you've got beautiful warm oceans, you've got temperate forests, and all that stuff you see in Lord of the Rings, that's all the way down in the south. The north is a very tropical or subtropical. It's completely different plant life, completely different look and feel. There's no huge desert in the middle. There's no wasted space. New Zealand is what you get when you say, here, design a country and put all this stuff in it and don't waste any space. I really recommend going to New Zealand, but I have to ask, have you been there? Is there any thought of checking out New Zealand?
I have had thought of checking out New Zealand. That is literally on my bucket list. I have seen photographs from friends that have been there, and photographers specifically, landscape photographers that are friends of mine, they've been there. And they've come back with these amazing pictures, and I drool at wanting to go there. So yeah, I mean, that is a destination I would love to go. I have been lucky enough to go to Switzerland. As you know, Switzerland is an incredibly expensive country, and as you know, also I love mountains and what have you. But there is different diversities in the whole of the world. I mean, you've got Iceland. Iceland is an amazing place. The Farne Islands. I don't know whether you're aware of the Farne Islands. Are you?
I am, yes.
Well, that is literally just above us in the UK, and it's a Norwegian island. So that's another place I'd love to visit. There are too many bucket lists, and I don't know whether I'm going to survive long enough to visit them all. So I better hurry up.
No, I know, and we could spend hours literally just talking about travel destinations. I myself love the Adirondacks of the United States. I love the west coast of North America, from Vancouver straight the way down to San Francisco. The UK, you've talked about that to death. Absolutely beautiful there as well. Continental Europe. Africa and Antarctica is on my bucket list, but I can't imagine being able to get down there. But even, and it's kind of strange, but by watching the television show Top Gear and now the Grand Tour, I see these, I don't see these as car shows, I see them more as travel shows. And the episodes that I enjoy the most are where they travel. And there's one episode where they go through South America, and it's just so beautiful. Just another place again on my bucket list. But we got to get off travel destinations, or we're never going to get through this interview. It's going to be longer than the Peter Gregg video I just did, which was an hour and a half. But when you travel, obviously your equipment's going to be different. What do you take with you when you travel in terms of equipment and accessories?
Well, because I've got the camper van, I'm very lucky in that respect, because I can pretty much park very close to where I want to be. So I would take as much as I could, really, that I need for that trip. Now, as I said before, wildlife comes into play as well. I do love wildlife, so that would come into play with my camera gear. I'm lucky enough to own the Canon 100 to 400mm f4.5 to f5.6, which is the Mark II version. And I would take that with me because that's quite a compact lens, but it can, if you put a 1.4 converter on that, then you can get some nice reach out of it. It's also about fieldcraft as well, of course. But yeah, camera gear, I would take the Canon M6 Mark II. I would probably take GoPro. I would take the GoPro would be one that I would take for vlogging, and also the M6 Mark II. I might not even get the M6 Mark II out for vlogging if I'm on a big trip. It would have to be something light. And also the phone that I'm talking on right now, the Galaxy S10e, is a very good phone for vlogging. And I do use a gimbal with that. So that's a very lightweight way of vlogging whilst you are on tour. The other camera that I would use, of course, would be the Canon EOS R, and also my lenses of choice, if I was to take them, which I do, would be the Canon 24mm f2.8 LIS USM Mark II, and the 17mm tilt shift lens, which is a very big lens, and it's a lovely lens. And that's being 17mm, you get a lot in there. And also I would take because I'm in the mountains, if I'm up in the mountains, I sometimes take the 70 to 200mm f2.8, which I kind of use for portraits, but I also use for landscapes. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of gear there, to be fair, and obviously not forgetting the tripods, and not forgetting the time release. What are they? Remote release, sorry. So not forgetting them. And also I do take I don't know whether you're aware, but I have a Phantom 4 drone, which I use a lot as well, and have registered in the UK because that is law now. So I take that on my trips and fly above the mountains and get spectacular views that way as well.
Kindred spirits here. I don't have that drone, but I do have the Mavic Pro. I'm licensed for both the United States and Canada because that is what's required now. I only use these for a couple of times a year, and people will often ask, are they worth it? And I'll say yes and no. If you're into flying, no. After about an hour, you're really done. That's kind of it. But if you see it as an aerial camera, if you see it as something that can get you those shots or that video, it produces some amazing stuff. I've shot some incredible stuff, some views of Lake Simcoe here in Ontario. I've also shot the Thousand Islands, which borders Ontario and New York State. And I've just shot some video of my son. So yeah, the drone is an amazing tool. But speaking of tools, I'm sure the people out there would like to know what kind of editing software you use.
Okay, well, I use Lightroom and Photoshop, the standard industry standard, I believe.
For somebody starting out as a travel photographer, what would you tell them? What gear do you recommend they start with?
Well, I did actually forget one piece of very, very important equipment that I do take with me, being a landscape photographer, just reeling back there. I do take filters as well, which is very important to do for the sky and what have you. So filters are a very important aspect of my life and what I do.
Now, Ian, I want to talk to you about something. This might seem a little personal, but you've been mooning us an awful lot lately in your videos.
I certainly have.
Why does the moon show up so much lately in your videos?
Ah, well, there's a thing. Okay, well, it shows up for one reason, really. As we're in lockdown at the moment in the UK, and I'm sure the world is, sadly, I won't diverge on that and talk too much about it, but as we are all on lockdown, I have come up with ideas for my fellow friends who are, well, a lot of them are photographers. They love photography. So people that know me love photography. So we all come up with ideas of what we can do. And I came up with the suggestion, well, let's take, the nights have been so clear lately in the UK that I thought, right, the moon's showing, let's get on and do the moon. So I gave everyone a challenge of trying to get the best moon shot that they could possibly get. And that's what we done. So that was the reason I was out there pretty much every single night for 8 nights getting the moon shot. One night out of the 8 nights was cloudy. I find that quite impressive. So as astrophotography goes, any astrophotographer out there will know that cloudy nights are a miserable night. So we obviously don't go out and try to do photography when it's cloudy. So anyway, that's where the moon shots come from, because I wanted to encourage people to get out in their gardens, stay at home and enjoy what they have in their own backyards, which obviously you look up and you can see an amazing array of interest up there, including satellites, meteorites. It just goes on and on and on. There's nebulas that you can capture with your own DSLR and up to 100mm lens. So you can capture nebulas with a 100mm lens, believe it or not. Not a lot of people know that. And it's incredible what you can get. So as a deep sky, deep space object, and you can get that with a 100mm lens. I mean, that is incredible, isn't it?
Well, Ian, I'm kind of gobsmacked right now. I did look at your videos, and what really astonished me is how good they look. Essentially, this looked like the type of stuff I'd see in a Hollywood movie. The moon was not a small little circle surrounded by black. It was taking up a good portion of the frame. So what I really want to know, and I know a lot of my viewers want to know, how do you capture it? First of all, what is the equipment, and how do you set it up? How do you set the exposure? How do you set the ISO? Is there any special equipment that you use? So if you can kind of just sort of take a step by stack, would really love to know how you do this, because some of us would love to get into it, and we think that it's a very, very expensive hobby. We need to spend lots and lots of money to do it.
Okay, well let me just say, you don't need to spend loads and loads of money to do this, to capture a good moon. Firstly, you can. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop there because there's a pun there. But anyway, firstly, what you would need is a DSLR, any kind of camera really, that would capture or have a long enough reach of a lens to be able to get close enough to that moon. Now, I know I've got the Canon M6 Mark II. I'll tell you what I used, and then I can tell you what you can use and what's out there and what's available. Now, I personally used the Canon M6 Mark II for these images behind me, and that was with the Canon 100 to 400mm f4.5 to 5.6 lens. That was the Mark II version, but you can use the Mark I version. It doesn't matter. They're both very similar. And because the moon's not really moving very quickly at all, you can capture that very sharp and very, with a reasonably good shutter speed of about anywhere between 1/100th of a second to 200th of a second easily on a bright night. Now, as the phases of the moon go along, so you're getting quarter moon, you'll realise that it'd probably be about 60th of a second with your shutter speed at an ISO of 100 to 400. And obviously the lens, I would couple the lens with, particularly my lens, I would put a 2x extender on that to get even more reach. So couple that with an M6 Mark II, which is a crop sensor, you're actually achieving 1240 millimeters of focal length equivalent. We know that's not true because it's a crop sensor, but that's equivalent to what you're getting. So that, when you look at the moon in your screen, it is looking rather large. Now, the trick now is obviously to get that moon sharp. And the way to do that is to be on a tripod. And so you need to be dead still and get the tripod evenly balanced with your lens and camera. Now, I tend to put my the connection between my camera normally to the camera head. I can't think what you call that. Maybe you could help me out, Simon, I don't know. But it's the connection where you clip it into the head, the ball head, or whatever you do. Now that I put on, because the lens is quite heavy on the end, and it would be unbalanced if I was to put it on the camera, I would put that on the lens. So that would be the foot would go onto the lens and then clip into the ball head. So moving on from there, I would then point that to the moon, zoom right in. So like I said, I would get 1240 millimeters out of that focal, out of that setup. The setup, I will reiterate, is a Canon M6 Mark II with a 100-400 millimeter lens and a 2x extender on top of that. And also what you're going to need is a cable release or a timer, so you can actually take the shot without touching the camera. That way you can be assured that you're not going to touch the camera when you hit the shutter button. If you haven't got a shutter release, it doesn't matter. You can put it on a 2-second delayed timer or a 10-second delay timer. And with a long lens as the 100-400 mm with a 2x extender on, I would always go to 10 seconds because that will move for quite a while. And the other thing, of course, it doesn't matter how stable your tripod is. The other thing that you got to worry about when it comes to these shots and getting them clinically sharp is the fact wind. So get yourself somewhere that you're out of the wind. But thankfully, in these sessions that I've had, there has been very little wind, and at night it does tend to die down as well anyway. So we've been lucky. So that's the equipment that I use. But the equipment that you can use and what anyone else can use, they can use smaller stuff than that. I mean, the crop sensor gives you the reach, so that's good in itself. But you can use cheaper gear, really. You don't have to have an M6 Mark II. The M6 Mark II can be up to about 800, 900 pounds, I believe. I can't remember now. I bought mine a few months back. But you can use a lot cheaper cameras than that to get the moon image. At the end of the day, it's a box to capture light, and that's all it is. And it's all around about the lens, to be honest.
Thanks a lot, Ian. So what other celestial bodies have you captured?
I have captured the Milky Way. The Milky Way is an amazing astro area of the sky. The Milky Way is not that present at the moment, unfortunately. That becomes present more in the summer period, and you get a bigger viewing of the Milky Way in that respect. Now, when the Milky Way is up and running in June, July is probably a good time to start viewing it really well. And Also, you want the dead of night, so it needs to be as dark as possible. So there is points of the night that is classed as being pitch black, and in summer you'll end up with about 1 hour of pitch black darkness in the evening sky, and that is when you want to view it, and that is when you want to take photographs of it and get it at its best. And also a very, very dark area, like I said, so there you get no light pollution and you're getting the best colours. There is another way of capturing the Milky Way, of course, and that is with a tracker, and that is what I've got. I have an Ioptron tracker, and I put my lens and camera on that, and I point the tracker itself at the North Star. So I basically Polaris, and that is pointed at North Star, accurately pointed there. And then I turn it on, and what happens is it tracks the stars beautifully, and I can use a very long exposure and get all the colours of the Milky Way, and I can get it all lovely and crisp. And then if I've got a nice foreground, for example, I would take that foreground first at a normal exposure without turning the tracker on, and then I'd blend the two images together and get a fantastic image out of the two. So that's one celestial place. And in that celestial place of the Milky Way, you do have a lot of nebulas and very good deep star stuff in the Milky Way itself. I am at the moment trying to find M42, which a lot of astronomers will know what that means, and that is the galaxy, M42 galaxy, which is a tiny little galaxy which is millions upon millions of light years away. And this is it here, and you'll see it on the back screen. Now that is an absolutely amazing thing to view, and you do not need a huge lens with that to capture that image, believe it or not. So that image there had a lot of images stacked on top of each other. And what you do by stacking images is you produce a sharper image and with more colour. So that's what you do basically. So yeah, they're the celestial. I mean, I could go on all day really, Simon, because there is so much out there. It is amazing. You really is amazing what is out there. Now I use an app. Just one more thing. I use an app, and it's called Skywalk or Skywalker. And that shows me exactly where all these celestial places are in the night sky, and it pinpoints the North Star for me and everywhere. So that's a good one to actually show the viewers, really, is that app, because that app will give you a guide, and it actually shows you and tells you what these different places are, and that'll get you involved in night photography, I think.
Ian has given me a list of all the equipment that he uses for his photography and his astrophotography. So you guys can find that in the description down below, because there's a lot of great things that, I was going to say Peter, that Ian has been telling us about. Ian, about 10 years ago, I purchased this telescope used, and I loved using it. The first thing, of course, everybody does is they lock onto the moon, and it was amazing just seeing it. You know, obviously you can't see the landing site of the Apollo program, but you can really see those craters up close. Then I went on to try and capture Mars. But the one thing that just created an incredible sense of awe and a sense of wonderment of the universe was when I was able to capture Jupiter. And Jupiter took so much work. I had to start by not zooming in all the way, because it's so very hard. When you're dealing with distances of that scale, you have to start out very wide, and then you start to, you tighten in to the center, then you switch out that lens, you put in another one. And I was able to put Jupiter in the frame and see 4 of the moons. And I was just completely in awe. And what really bothers me the most about that whole experience is that telescope was old enough that I couldn't hook up a camera to it. I couldn't capture photos, and I couldn't capture videos. Have you ever had an experience like that?
Yes, I have. I owned a telescope not that many moons ago. I am going to buy another one. We'll move on to that in a minute, but the telescope I owned was a mirror, what is it, a Newtonian type? A Newtonian type, which is the mirror in the back, I believe, and it's quite a long tube. It's quite a simple telescope, and it was an 8-inch one, so it was an 8-inch diameter. Anyway, I had a very similar experience to you yourself, actually, with the Jupiter, and that was not that many moons ago. And there's the picture. It's a very fuzzy picture, mind, because it is so far away, and the light was good. I was in a dark area. It's just at the time I didn't really understand about photo stacking and images in the way they are today. I mean, the technology now has, wow, it is just gone through the roof, and especially with telescopes and the mirrorless cameras and cameras in general, and their sensors and how they capture things. So now it's amazing what you can get now compared to what I got then. And this is Jupiter right here, so it's a bit of a fuzzy blob, but you can see the colours there. So yeah, I've had that experience, and that was when I saw that for the first time. I could actually couple my I was lucky enough to be able to couple my camera onto that, so that was good. So that's how you got this image, obviously. But it was amazing, absolutely amazing. When I saw that in the camera, I was like, wow, come and have a look, kids, come and have a look. And I was so excited. And the kids were like, really? That's just a blob, Dad. So it's like, what? That's Jupiter. Don't you understand? It's amazing. So that got me a bit hooked. When I found that, I knew where Jupiter was. It was just a big bright star at the time. I don't think that's so present now. That was when it was quite close to the Earth. Yeah, I mean, you've got Venus in the sky now. If I had, and that's very evident every night at the moment. I can see Venus run around the night sky, which is amazing seeing that. But I can only see it through a very small camera, and I've tried with my 100mm to 400mm with 2x extender on the crop censored camera, and I just can't get anywhere close. And that is where the telescopes do come in. And I've had my eye on a beautiful telescope. I don't know whether that's a question you would like to know about, or...
Well, I actually just got an email from Mr. Wickham, and he said, and I'm kind of surprised about this too, you say use the M6 Mark II. Now, Canon, Sony, and Nikon, they all have cameras that are specifically designed for astrophotography. Why not use one of those for your work? I'm curious, and so is Mr. Wickham.
Okay, the reason I don't personally use one of those, for me personally, there has to come a time where you have to try and stop spending money. It's very difficult. When you're in photography, it's very difficult. And the amount of genres that I cover and do, I am more broke than I am anything else, to be honest, because I do love to have the best as I can possibly have within my budget, and everyone's got a budget, and so have I. So I find that I personally like value for money, and because of that reason, I find that buying a camera specific for night photography is something that I find difficult to grasp, if I'm honest. The Canon, I have looked at the Canon EOS R, and that is a lovely camera in every way, but it won't take photos during the day at normal. The color would be very weird, let's put it like that. And that comes from Canon themselves as well. So it's not a camera that you could use daily, day in, day out. And for 2,500 area pounds or dollars, I'm not sure what it is in dollars, but It's a very expensive camera to have that you're not going to use every day. So again, like I said, I like value for money. So therefore, I probably wouldn't buy one of those, but I would buy a telescope because I can couple my camera onto the telescope. Now I know, sorry, I also know that the RA, the way they do, you can have a cheaper camera and have the filter taken out, the infrared filter, I believe, is it? It's one of the filters that give you more colours in the night, in deep space, basically. Anyway, the filters, you can get the filter taken out of a normal camera. So if you bought a cheap DSLR, you could do it that way.
Thanks, Ian. Producing a channel about photography requires an awful lot of video. Something I find very interesting, often photographers and videographers see each other very differently. Photographers, they want a dedicated camera and they just can't understand why us video folks don't want a video-centric camera. What has being the owner and editorial director of your own channel taught you about video? Has it changed your outlook on photography or video in any way?
Absolutely, yes. So I believe that having a YouTube channel has changed my opinion with video. I've always loved video, mind. If you look back on some of my YouTube videos, I'm skiing. I've got a GoPro on the end of a pole and I'm skiing down the mountain going crazy. So I mean, I've always loved video, but that cinematic look, I really do love that look. If some of the videos that that some cameras can produce are lovely, it's really nice. And I'm actually looking at two cameras right now, and in my opinion, I think the Canon EOS R wins over the M6 Mark II, in my honest opinion. The look that I'm getting from this this Canon EOS R is beautiful. It's a beautiful look to it. I can't explain what the look is, but it's beautiful, and it has given me that emphasis on wanting to learn more and more and more about video. I've learnt a lot in the last 2 years about color grading, about what C-Log is. And now I never knew anything about what C-Log was until the Canon EOS R came out. And that taught me a huge thing. So C-Log, what is C-Log? So there I was, finding out all the information about what C-Log was. And 8-bit C-Log and 10-bit C-Log. How do I get 10-bit C-Log? Well, so you use a screen, don't you? An external screen. So it's all really nice to me. I'm really enjoying video as well. So yeah, I go out a lot and try my best with videos, but I'm learning. I'm a learner on it, and it's working well for me, I think.
Well, Ian, before we get to our final segment on user questions, I have one for you myself. I've been shooting with a Canon 70D for, well, since it came out, literally a month after it came out, so I'm on my 7th year. I really enjoy the camera. It's done a lot for me in the last 3 years while I've been waiting to upgrade, and just recently I thought I was going to leave Canon altogether. I was tired of just not getting the video capabilities I needed, but in terms of photographs, it was really, really good. I was very happy with it. Around 2016-17, I started looking to upgrade, and I started looking everywhere. I looked for the Sony a7 III, I looked at the X-T3, I looked at the Sony a7S II, I even considered the GH5. But with what's happening with Canon lately, if Canon can produce a really good camera, I'm really happy to stay because I can bring all my lenses with me. I'm considering either the R5 or the R6, but that's not where the question is. The question is regarding lenses. So because I have a YouTube channel as my primary use case and my secondary use case is run and gun work with family, I'm considering two lenses and I'd like your thoughts on them. I'm thinking of getting the RF 15-35 and the RF 24-105 f4. What do you think? Have you used either of those lenses? What do you think about them?
I think those lenses, I haven't used those lenses, but I've seen plenty of images and I've seen plenty of videos on them, and I've seen the results from them. And the 15 to 35mm really appeals to me as an RF lens. Now, because I'm going mirrorless and I've got 2 mirrorless cameras now, that does appeal to me a lot more in the respect sharpness, and the RF lenses are really, really, really sharp. You just think sometimes you can't get any sharper, can you? And they pull out the bag something else and you just think, wow. So the 15 to 35mm f2.8 RF lens, yes, I would highly recommend that. I would want that in my kit bag, definitely. The 24 to 105, did you say?
Yeah, the f4, not the one with the variable focal. What's it called? Not the focal length, the focal ratio range.
Yeah. Well, okay, so the 24 to 105 RF, I would have that in my kit bag as well if I was new to photography. Now, I've already got the 24 to 70mm f2.8 Mark II version, and that was £1,800. So I'm a bit reluctant to go out and buy a 24 to 105mm. But if I did have a 24 to 105 f4 many years ago, before I then converted myself to the 24 to 70mm f2.8. Because I've done weddings, I found the f2.8 side of it much more appealing for wedding photography, and therefore I sold my 24 to 105mm f4 lens because of that reason. So for me personally, it depends. I mean, it depends on what you do, Simon, whether you want to do weddings or whether you do weddings or portraiture. If you do, then I would highly recommend the 28mm to 70mm f2.8 over and above the 24 to 105 because of the reason of the f numbers and the light coming into your lens, which is more valuable, and to get a sharp shot of your wedding than it is to you know have very high ISOs. You want the best image for the customer, don't you, really?
Well, in my case, I don't have any more time left in the day, so I don't do wedding or events. It's everything I do is personal, for some family and friends, or what you see here on the YouTube channel. But I left something out. The one lens that I'm going to bring over from my 70D is the EF 51.2, and I figure for portraits that will be a really good portrait lens, even on a new RF body. I think that's still a pretty good lens.
Yes, it is. It's a fantastic lens. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are so many nice lenses out there, even still. I know there's been the RF lenses are being made, and they're slightly sharper. There's not much in it, to be honest, but is it enough to warrant more money to be paid out for more lenses when you've got the... I mean, Canon have been very clever in the fact that they made the Canon EOS R with an adapter, so you could seamlessly, and it is seamless, I must admit, after owning the Canon EOS R, I don't even notice that I have the adapter on there anymore, and I don't notice any failings in autofocus at all. It is as sharp as what it was with the my Canon 5D Mark III. In fact, it's quicker than my Canon 5D Mark III, much quicker in the focusing, which says it all, really. But yeah, I mean, the 24. Let me go back to the 24-105 f4 RF lens. That is a really good lens for an everyday lens. If you've only got one lens in your bag, that'd be the one to have, if I'm honest, because that'd be the one that you could. That is the most versatile lens that you could have. It's got a good focal range. You've got the 24mm for if you wish to do landscapes, and then you've got all the way up to the 100mm for portraits. And as you know, long focal lengths are very good for portraiture. I wouldn't recommend going 25mm for a portrait lens. That tends to be very distorting and doesn't look very pleasant for a lady or a gentleman. It tends to, if you're up close to a subject, which you would have to be at 25mm, it would distort your face, for example. So that's not a good look. So I wouldn't highly recommend that.
And now let's take a look at some of our user questions. King Sam asks, how to start capturing astro, especially on an APS-C?
Well, that is down to the lens more than it is the APS-C or the camera itself. You can capture good astrophotography as long as you've got a good lens, and it's like any DSLRs. You can put the lens on there and you'll capture a good image. So I would say anything between a focal length of, dare I say, 50mm all the way up to 600mm would capture some amazing astrophotography if you know where to look in the sky.
Thank you, Ian. Frosty asks, have you used the EOS RA? What are your thoughts on this? And he goes on to say, I'm getting a 1-meter plane wave telescope with a 70mm circle. Any thoughts on images?
Wow. A plane wave, did you say?
Yeah, plane wave.
They're very expensive, aren't they? They tend to be, I think, a plane wave microscope. Microscope? Let me start again. A plane wave 1 meter. Is that right? Is that what you said, 1 meter?
Frosty says he's going to be getting himself a 1-meter plane wave telescope with a 70mm circle. Any thoughts on images with that?
Oh, okay. So the well, I could do an example here. The Canon EOS R is a specialised camera. It is designed for astrophotography, and what the astrophotography cameras have is they have an additional enhancement of an infrared blocking IR filter. Now the IR filter, this filter enables the EOS RA, for example, and any other cameras that are converted into this to allow more hydrogen alpha light to reach the sensor. What this does is give more colour in the images, basically, and so therefore enhances nebulas and deep space objects. So it's a very good thing to have, and that is what a specialised camera does, as opposed to a non-specialised camera for night photography. So a normal camera wouldn't have this filter installed into it. However, you can have this filter installed or installed into normal cameras by specialists that do this. So you can do it in a cheaper way, I suppose, but there are cameras like Canon have specialised in this field and have brought out this particular camera, which is the RA, the EOS RA. Well, I hope that covers that question.
Power Sermon asks, what are your exposure settings for capturing the Milky Way? It's a good question. And what post-processing do you do on your astrophotography?
Okay, well that's an easy one. I tend to use anywhere between 15 to 30 seconds when it comes to the Milky Way, for example, and I would use a lens that's very fast. So I would use something like the Sigma 24mm to f1.4, and I would probably put that at f2, because f1.4 on that particular Sigma lens does leave elongated stars if it's wide open. So I've kind of realised that as I've gone along. So what we tend to do, so f1.4, ISO is round about 400 to 800, so you're getting a nice clean image. And the, like I say, shutter speed would be around about 15 to 20 seconds. If you haven't got a sharp lens like that and you've got an f4 lens, you would need to keep that open a lot longer, and your ISO range would be higher. So for example, if you have an f4 lens, your f4 lens you would need to be at 30 seconds. Your ISO range would be 1600 ISO at f4, and your shutter speed would be 30 seconds, like I said. So yeah, that is my settings, and that is what I use. So the sharper the lens, the better that you're going to get the image.
Thank you, Ian. This one's from Liam Jewell. How would you recommend trying to locate good locations for landscape photos, and what kind of focal lengths do you tend to use?
Okay, so focal length first. Easily, focal length is determined on where I am at the time, and I tend to use anywhere from 17mm focal length to up to 200mm, and that is dependent. 17mm will be very wide angle, very nice, get everything in, you know. So for example, if I'm shooting a lighthouse on a rocky outcrop, that would be a 17mm lens. If I was in the mountains shooting at another mountain and that's got plenty of detail and it looks lovely, then I'll probably be shooting around about anywhere between 100 to 200mm focal length. The locations that I go and how I find the locations are pretty easy, really. I mean, they are. Everyone follows everyone, if that makes sense. You know, we tend to look at each other's posts, we tend to look at each other's photography, and I know these places are there anyway, and I tend to revisit certain areas quite a lot as well. I do use Google Maps a lot to pinpoint, because they have a satellite view. So you can actually zoom right into the satellite and look at areas that you might be of interest to you. That's another way that I look. Also, I do buy a lot of books that interest me about landscapes and areas, and I'm inspired by other photographers as well.
Thank you, Ian. And now for our last question from Shridhara. Which square filter system is good for landscape photography? Some lenses like the Sigma 14-24 is good, but we can't use traditional threaded filters.
Okay, so threaded filters I don't use anyway. I do use the slot-in filters, and Lee do a fantastic slot-in filter system. Also NiSi, there is Haida, which I use as well. There are many filter companies out there, but I would highly recommend, from my point of view, I would highly recommend NiSi or Lee. Now, they're not the cheapest filters in the world, but they are very good, and they tend to be a very neutral colour on there. Some cheaper filters, I won't mention names, but some cheaper filters do leave a very nasty magenta colour cast to them, so you have got to be a little bit aware of what you buy. Now, I've always said to people that have come on to my workshops that why would you put you know, a piece of glass over a really nice expensive piece of glass that wasn't anywhere, it was inferior basically. Why would you do that? I don't think you would you, if you look at it that way? So you really want to spend the money on filters and get the best filters you can. So Lee or NiSi are the ones for me personally.
Thank you, Ian. That concludes all the questions from my viewers, and I don't have any further questions for you too. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join us here on The Ordinary Filmmaker.
Thank you very much, Simon. It's been a pleasure, as always, and thank you very much for inviting me to your channel. It's been a lovely old job.
Thank you, Ian. And thank you to you for tuning in. Now, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe to Ian's channel. He's at 710 subscribers. Let's get him over that 1,000 subscriber mark. It shouldn't take us too long. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. All equipment used and notes are placed in the description box, show more box, or down arrow thingy next to the title on the mobile app.